on YouTube here with Eli. We are going to get started right now. Let's just jump right in. Just before we get started with our coffee chat portion for anybody joining us, if you are not familiar with Rumie, I'm just going to give you a quick spiel on what this is all about. So welcome. Today we're having a coffee chat, and my name is Kami. I'm going to be the host today. I'm the community manager with Rumie, here to help folks make the most out of their Rumie experience. And for anyone just discovering us, we're also a not-for-profit, and we are on a mission to bridge the gap between school and everything else. And on Rumie.org, you can find our full collection of over 1,000 miniature courses called Bites. And these courses are on career and life skills topics, things that you might not have learned in school. Each one just takes a few minutes to complete and also leaves you with some actionable suggestions that you can take into your regular life and actually put your learning to use. And our community that's hosted on Discord and on our social media platforms is a space where folks can actually be social with other Rumie learners. And you can join us for events just like this that extend on the content that you can learn yourself on Rumie.org. Without further ado, we are joined today by Eli. Eli is an instructional designer and a Rumie volunteer and has lots of experiences to share. Welcome, Eli. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Not too bad. I'm really excited to get a chance to talk to you today because I know that you have so much to share. I basically have a bunch of questions for you. We're also live on YouTube, so if anyone does have any questions for us there, I will let you know, and we can answer those live while we're recording. So just to start us off, just in case anybody doesn't know what an instructional designer does, so because you are currently working as a senior instructional designer, would you mind giving us a little overview of what exactly an instructional designer does in their day-to-day?
Sure. So instructional designers design instruction, which means that anything that you might have encountered, particularly like on the job, that was supposed to help you learn to do a new thing, probably came through an instructional designer. So a lot of people might not have great experiences with instructional stuff, and instructional designers, there's a big push on making things better, more engaging, and more effective as well. And when I say that people might not have great experiences, if you think back to like your first job, which might be one you have now or one you had 10 or 15 years ago, you probably remember there was something really boring and maybe it was very plodding and not well laid out. So instructional designers have a skill set and a knowledge base for the theory to go ahead and keep that from happening. And to basically make your instructional experience very efficient and effective and enjoyable as well.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds really like the instructional designer's job is just to get whatever content someone needs to learn and put it into a package that is actually usable by them.
In a way. I mean, our big focus is on changing behaviors, not just, let's stuff this knowledge in your head, but so that you can operate the fancy copy machine or coffee machine, or fill out the paperwork appropriately, or any sort of other thing that you might come across in your in work. So yeah.
And in terms of your work also as a Rumie learning designer, I'm just curious to also find out how the volunteer work that you're doing for Rumie also connects to what you're doing now in your job.
Yeah, so as a Rumie learning designer, we're building micro-learnings, which is great because it pushes my writing skills to be concise and straightforward, which is, it's been a place where I've struggled. We all have our struggles, and that's been something that I've definitely have used the practice on. And so it also, the micro-learning as a modality, as a form of learning, it's really accessible. Because think about, if you learned something 6 weeks ago, you might not necessarily remember it now, but you might remember where you saw the information and re-look it up. And so having that very digestible bite, You can look it up, you can get your key points again, and then you can implement it and do whatever you were trying to do even better. Like I wrote a bite on how to talk to children. So if you're me, who isn't often around children between COVID and just my job and stuff, and you're going to a company barbecue now that, or when things open up, you might be like, okay, what are some points that I can take with me? And it asks about, asking a kid about what they see, about events that they have, about, not talking to them like this. Yeah, so things like that give you a quick reminder.
Mm-hmm. So even though the topics are quite different, obviously you're not talking about the same content in your current job as you do on Rumie Learn. It's still kind of the same concept of breaking down a bigger idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just picked that one because it popped in my head. It was a fun one. I put unicorns in it. So yeah.
Going into your career though, so this is a little bit different than what you studied. I know that you studied archaeology and history before you ended up here, and you've worked in roles in museum, as a museum tech and as a curriculum developer. So how did that career shift happen for you?
So when I first got my undergraduate degree in history and archaeology, I ended up with a position with the National Park Service as a museum tech. And a big part of that was community outreach, working with the local Tribal Historic Preservation Office, as well as the local community as a whole, local government offices. So there was a lot of informational, instructional design there to go ahead and share the history of the area and stuff like that. And then also, of course, when one gets interns, you have to teach them how to do the things. So I built courses on orienteering and things like that. And then moving into the museum side, of course, also working on developing interesting and really cool courses and spiels about the museum collections. I also had an assistant when I was in grad school in the museum, and that got a lot more into the educational side of the museum because we had schools coming in. And anyone who has any sort of background in education is familiar with all of the state school standards. And I was working with 4 different states. So working with standards, working with objectives, getting all of those incorporated, that made actually the transition to instructional design, where you're just coming up with your own objectives, really nice, because I was so used to working with all of these very granulated objectives and standards. Yeah.
So yeah, really just about that ability to explore further what you're also interested in, and just applying it to being able, I guess, and now because you're also remote and virtual, you're able to reach so many people, even just right from home.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, my current position, we're across all 4 time zones in the U.S. So yeah, being able to speak this common language of objectives and such, and then also build our products for the company, so that right now we're working on a big employee onboarding program, which is 9 weeks of curriculum altogether. All of that work with objectives and standards definitely set me up well to do that. So yeah.
And how do you find that your previous roles really show up in your work today? Do you find that at all? You maybe think back to something specific that you learned or that you did in some of your previous roles that you're still enacting today, very specifically?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm really great at trivia, thanks to building museum educational things, everything from Mayan lost wax molds to forensic anthropology. So that is always a hit, sort of. But no, really, when it comes down to it, putting together different pieces of information and making it so that someone can digest it into a way that enriches their life. It's a lot of similar formulas with that. So if anything, the hard skills of organizing my objectives, of the things that I want people to be able to do when they're done, and calculating the amount of time that things can take, and different engagement media. That's probably what I take across all of these different things. In history and archaeology, I worked in China doing ESL stuff, and now I'm doing corporate stuff in the health insurance industry. There's a lot of similarities across them all.
And I mean, I know that you mentioned working in China as well. That was actually the next thing that I was thinking to ask you, was really about that experience. Obviously, the working environments in a different country can be very different. Were there any culture shocks that you found moving there from the United States?
Oh gosh. So that was a really interesting experience, because I actually applied for the position thinking it would be a remote position online.
Like you were planning on staying in the United States and then working remotely? Gotcha.
Yeah, and then they were like, okay, now let's get your visa going. And I was like, oh, okay.
So you kind of accidentally moved to China?
So like, I guess I'm going to China. Why not? So there was that, just the whole like, acknowledging I'm actually going to China now was a bit of a shock. I was in Beijing, which was a very international city. It's the government capital. Between Beijing and Shanghai, they're both huge business cities. So, all the street signs are in the alphabet. I'm not going to say English because it wasn't actually English. It was in Pinyin. And the infrastructure was definitely set up and very intuitive. So that was really, really cool. At the same time, living in an apartment that was built during a dynasty was just like...
I mean, as a history major, I'm sure you just also appreciated all of the history that you could be around. It
just floored me at times. You're walking by and it's like, yes, this temple is 300 years old. And you're like,
that's so casual.
Okay.
A casual 300 years old.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Like, the building across the street is even older. But yeah, that in and of itself. Working environment, I would say, okay, using a copy machine in Chinese was really complicated, but I eventually figured it out. But my colleagues were amazing. I really enjoyed working with all of the people in the ESL industry who I met there. I'm not totally sure how different it would have been from the States, just because it was actually my first corporate role in general. So I don't know if it was China, urban China, ESL, or corporate in when I bring up the differences. Because the workflow was definitely really interesting, working with different people like the Chinese press and their auditing group. But some of these things I might have come across similar parallels in a regular stateside corporate position. So yeah.
Oh, it sounds like there is, just as much as there was a ton of change, just like what I was hearing from your story too, is that some of those changes probably you would have come across working anywhere, whether you were working in the States or somewhere else. It was also just kind of new job and new things to learn.
Yep, there's new deadlines, there's new programs, people want to get their stuff done. Yep.
And what would you say maybe is the most unexpected part about your journey to instructional design? I mean, it sounds like there have been quite a few twists and turns. Is there anything to you that stands out as the most unexpected part?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to say, actually, my shift over to corporate was pretty unexpected. It came due to COVID. I left China for a visa run / vacation in January of 2020.
Right.
Planning on going back for my ESL position, but I couldn't get back into the country. So I had my whole one backpack of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
And eventually, due to COVID's impact on the economy, ended up having to find a new position, and ended up shifting over to the corporate side, which was really, I mean, in a way that was really beneficial for me, because China is also now making a big cutback on the for-profit side of ESLs. So I mean, I would have had to do it at some point, and
right.
I'm doing it before the push. But yeah, that was probably my biggest surprise, was just like, oh, surprise, you have to not go back.
Yeah,
and I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't brought my computer with me on vacation, because
I mean, I guess lesson learned, always bring your computer, I guess. I mean, I'm glad that you were I'm glad you were still able to have a solid vacation, but then I guess the vacation turned into just like, you just live here now.
I mean, a month in Thailand, 3 months in Malaysia. I mean, it was an adventure. That's, every day you wake up and you're like, it's an adventure. I'm not going to get stressed out. What happens, happens.
I really like that outlook. And I mean, nobody could have predicted that was how it was going to turn out. But it sounds like you made the best out of your situation. Like, you're in a new career now, which I'm sure you wouldn't have guessed a year ago.
Yeah, and I'm working with amazing people. I mean, which you have to say really makes or breaks a position. You could have an amazing, wonderful position on paper, but if you're working with people you don't enjoy, it's just like, such a slog.
Yeah.
But no, I'm working with amazing people. I'm making good things happen for people. It's definitely worked out for the best. I'm surprised with how well it's worked out.
Yeah. And I mean, now that you're actually in your current role, and you've obviously had your own experiences leading up to this moment, what challenges might you say aspiring instructional designers should be prepared to tackle? Like, what is something, in your opinion, as someone who does this now as a job, people should look out for if this is where they're headed?
Yeah, so what they should definitely look out for is the technology and building systems. So right now, my company uses Articulate 360 and their Storyline and Rise, which is one of the two big pieces of software used for this. And I, thankfully, while I was under lockdown in Malaysia, decided to teach myself this program. And so people coming into these positions who don't have that experience, it really is a steep learning curve. It's not horrible, but it really helps if you can go ahead and take advantage of their free trial and learn the basics of the program, so that when someone asks you to do something on your first day on the job or first week on the job, you're not trying to figure out, is that something we actually can do? Is that in the scope of the program? Then you're like, I know that I can somehow figure out how to do this.
Yeah. So even if you don't know every single feature, like, you have enough to go off of that you can look it up and just figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah, all those little tutorials, that's the work of instructional designers. And it's instructional designers using instructional designers.
Everyone just leaning on each other for that support. And just for anyone who missed that was Articulate, Storyline, and what was the last one?
Oh, so Articulate is the big company, and then the two programs for them are Storyline and Rise.
And Rise, that's the one that I missed. Okay, so you heard it here. So those are the programs you might want to know if you are interested in instructional design. So, and you said that they have free trials. Nothing stopping you from just giving it a try.
Yep. And they have amazing tutorials on their website, really. I mean, I'm building really cool things with it now, and all I did was learn from the tutorials, so and practice. Yeah,
so the tools are out there, and if this is something you really want to do, just seek them out. Basically, the info's out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if you were to maybe go back to like a year ago, like, is there anything, any kind of advice you would want to give your 1 year ago self, maybe to make this journey an easier one to, that others can take from this advice as well in their career journeys?
Goodness, trust myself, because I felt at that point that as an instructional designer, I also had to know the subject that I was building instruction on. And contrary to what you might think, you actually don't. That's what your subject matter experts are for. And so trust yourself to know how to take what the subject matter experts are telling you and put it in a way that will affect the change you want to see in your learners. I was continually taking feedback from the subject matter experts, the SMEs, on like, oh, well, I think you should word it this way, you should word it that way, you should put this picture in here, and instead, like, it's like, no, that's actually my specialty, is figuring out the best way to organize the page, the best way to organize the information, because they have 10 years of experience in this, and I'm trying to condense it down to like 15 minutes so that someone can fill out the right piece of paperwork so that the state doesn't audit the company. So, yeah.
And that's an important distinction too, right? Is like the person who is the subject matter expert, or the SME for short, that is their job. It's their job to bring the expertise, but it's not your job. That's the whole point of the subject matter expert. Right. And it might feel like you need to know everything, whereas, you're bringing a different eye to it, right? You're bringing a different perspective where you can break down that idea into something that makes sense. And in any case, like, it's kind of nice actually to have somebody who's not as closely connected to be able to pull out some of those big ideas.
Yeah, they're the subject matter expert, you're the learning expert. And trust yourself as the learning expert, and don't second guess yourself just because you don't know the subject. That's probably what I would tell myself. Yeah.
And for anybody who's just now interested in starting to pursue instructional design, do you have any tips on the first step or two that somebody can take in that direction? Like, I know one thing you already mentioned that I would say is probably one of those steps is look up Storyline and Rise and like do some tutorials. Are there any other things that you'd suggest as like a good first step to going into this career?
Yeah. So the software, getting familiar with the software, getting familiar with the very basics of learning theory, which you can do on any MOOC, massive online course, MOOC. It's those big online courses. Getting familiar with the basis of the learning theory and cognitive theory, because that's really where you're going to be pulling your expertise from. And following people who are doing what you're interested in. So on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, I learned so much from so many people. And there are a huge amount of instructional designers out there who enjoy sharing what they know and helping other instructional designers also be good at what they're doing. So, yeah.
And I know that one of the things that you also have a ton of experience in is actually crafting a portfolio. And so much so that I know that you even created a bite on Rumie Learn about how to craft a portfolio, even if you don't have professional experience. And as part of your volunteer role at Rumie, you, like I said, you wrote a bite on it and then included that bite in your portfolio. So it's very meta.
It is. But
yeah. And I was curious, like, based on all those experiences that you already have with portfolios, like doing your own and that kind of thing, where would you recommend that somebody start if they're starting from scratch to create a portfolio?
So first thing to do is just get something in your portfolio. Your portfolio is going to be a living document. It's going to be dynamic. You're going to add and remove things. But if you just sit there waiting for something that you think is good enough to put in, you're never going to make it. So just get started. Great is good, done is better. The other thing is to couch what you're putting in your portfolio, whether it's a lesson plan, whether it's a like one-page sheet of instructions, couch it in why you made it so that anyone looking at your portfolio is able to see the context, because that context is really what separates if you made something that meets the goal of your client or your boss or your supervisor, from just putting something together. Now, if you've made something that's just, you're like, okay, I'm going to try making a one-page sheet on how to hook up a microphone to a computer for podcasting. You're effectively being your own client, and you're effectively being your own client. So then your context is, I wanted to build a simple reference for hooking a microphone up to a computer for podcasting. It can be just as simple as that. So get something there, give it some context, and then once it's up, go ahead and proofread it and just make sure the spelling's right after you get your first and then after that, go ahead and proofread them before you start putting them up. But really just get that first file up and be like, yay, I have a portfolio, because then you're going to be excited to keep going. It's that momentum you have to build.
And how do you, start that portfolio? Do you need to have a personal website? Are there websites that you can just kind of use as a portfolio and you can link to it? What would you recommend?
So I got mine on one of those free websites. I think it's Wix. But I'm sure that Square or even Google Sites would work just fine. Because I wasn't totally sure if I was going to be working with a corporation or going freelance, I went ahead and got myself my own fancy.com name, but you don't have to do that. You absolutely do not have to do that. And then just build, just put an image of your product, and you can, even if you want to be fancy, use Inkscape or GIMP, which is the open source Photoshop, to take a screenshot from what you built and put it on a device. If you've seen those really cool product markups, that's just how you do it. Or product mock-ups, not markups. Mock-ups. And yeah, get it up there, click it, and somehow, however you can, host the project. To go ahead and pull back to Storyline and Rise, they actually allow you to publish things onto their site so that you can link people to it, so they can actually see your interactive learnings.
Yeah, and that's actually, that's kind of great for them too. Yeah, it's great for them because then they're able to highlight, okay, look at what people are doing with our programs, and then it's great for you because it's just freely available, right? You're able to just share it with whoever you'd like.
Absolutely.
And do you have any tips on, I'm just curious, sometimes folks might have something that maybe is proprietary, maybe you created something for work or for a certain, maybe you were in a situation where you created a course that was a paid course or something, and you weren't really able to share the full thing in your portfolio. How do you go about that?
Yeah, so you just say that it has proprietary information. You can't share the whole course. You will go ahead and you can do a quick write-up about the objectives. If you're actually putting anything in your portfolio that has been used in a business, it's really cool to go ahead and state what the impact of it was. Were you able to, let's go back to the one-page sheet about plugging a microphone in. Were you able to cut down calls to IT about plugging in microphones? The month before, IT got 2,000 calls about plugging in microphones, and after they got 20. That goes ahead and shows that you built something effective. That's what people want. So yeah, the context, if you can, any screenshots, blur out anything proprietary, of course. The impact of it, the software you may have used, you can, any sort of information that you think that someone who is often people look at portfolios to hire you. So any sort of information that someone who's looking to hire you might want. So think about it as like the keyword section of your resume.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're really just using it as evidence, right? Because somebody just needs to know why they should pick you over someone else. And if you've gone ahead and provided all that evidence, they would have, no reason to not hire you if you really were the best fit for the job, if you've already demonstrated that you can do it.
Exactly. You got it.
And I do love the point that you made too about quantifying your products, whatever you make, like whether it's something that's kind of just for you, and then you are able to find a way to demonstrate that value with numbers. That's just such a great resume tip in general, which is actually just touches on a really important point. It's not just that like the numbers are just going to appear in front of you, like you have to kind of go seeking them out.
You do, and that's often actually a really difficult part of your instructional design is people are like, yeah, you made it, let's go do it. And you're like, and then you have to go ahead and push to go ahead and get the results. So that is probably, actually, that might actually be the most challenging part of instructional design is to push everyone to give you information after you've made stuff.
Yeah. What kinds of numbers have you included on your portfolio? I'm just imagining, like maybe like website hits or something could be one number, or like you said, like the percentage of people, maybe you reduced the number of people who had questions. That's another one.
Yeah. So one of my projects when I was doing ESL work involved looking at feedback about our courses from the teachers who taught it and implementing that, but also trying to reduce the amount of feedback. So through putting in so many people hours, I was able to reduce the negative feedback about courses by 10% over so many people hours of work. Let's see, right now, something that my team has recently built has reduced the number of complaints to a government agency by a certain percentage. I have to look it up, but that's something that I would be putting in my resume if I needed to write one right now. Which actually is a bad habit. I should be keeping track of all of my personal wins as we go.
That's a really good reminder for everybody. It's just like, no matter where you are, whether you're comfortable and happy or you are actively looking for a new job and you just kind of need to do it, like it'll be so much easier come time when an opportunity does pop up. And it could come up like unexpectedly, like you might not be, actively looking for a job, and then something happens and you're like, well, this actually would be a really fantastic opportunity. Yeah. So like those are some numbers.
It's
like a nice self pep talk too. If you're having an off day, you just open up your sheet of like all of your achievements. You're like, actually, I did do a lot of things.
It is so nice, yes, to go ahead and see that and be like, yes, I do know what I'm doing. I don't care what this person said about me. I do know I made a good decision.
And just in terms of, where you're growing next, I know you've had a ton of changes come at you this last year. Some of them were purposeful and some of them were accidental, based on, what was just kind of happening around you. But where do you see yourself growing in this coming year, both as an instructional designer and otherwise? What projects are on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so I currently enjoy the position I'm in, which is great. So I would love to see myself grow within this position. I've been, my supervisor's been really awesome on leaning on me with my experience in building large-scale curriculum. So I mentioned earlier we had a 9-week onboarding that I was able to do a lot of the initial structural work on. So I'm hoping to continue to take on big projects like that and like get my hands dirty, doing all of that fun moving around and making everything align. And yeah, so they're continuing to work on large projects and seeing good results from those. Let's see, what else? Personally, oh gosh,
Has that taken a back seat?
Yeah, that really has. I'm currently in a really odd spot where I'm actually house sitting for my parents because they're off being grandparents, which just sort of happened. After having to leave Malaysia, I needed a place to live, and I was like, "Ma, can I stay for a week?" And she was like, "Yeah, hey, by the way, do you mind watching the house and the dog?"
I mean, it's a trade-off, right?
I mean, yeah, I don't mind. I love the dog. It's wonderful, and I love the house. It's just,
not even. It's just a bonus
odd.
then.
Yeah, so I just don't totally know. Whenever they wrap up, I'll figure something out.
Yeah.
But working remotely makes that a very broad possibility. I could decide to car camp across the national parks. I could decide to, continue to scuba dive on the North Carolina coast. Those might be considerate.
And I know you also just mentioned just now with being remote and how flexible it is for you. Is that very common for instructional designer jobs to be remote?
It seems to be now. COVID went ahead and proved that a lot of things in the office don't need to be in the office, which we could totally get into a really deep discussion about how that went ahead and prevented other people who may have been absurdly qualified for positions from getting into those positions in the past. But yeah, instructional design positions, I'm definitely noticing that they are more often than not remote. When I was looking for positions, I think I only had 2 that would have required me to be in the office, and one of them was working for a government agency that had some very specific information. So
just like really confidential stuff, you'd probably just need to.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have wanted to even have risk trusting like VPNs and stuff like that for it.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely it's yeah. To answer your question shortly, yes, I'm noticing that is common to people both.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, just like for anybody watching and anybody who's interested in being an instructional designer, it's just good stuff to know. And if working remote is on your checklist of things that you want, then, there's an option there. And and I know that you mentioned before too, like the really close connection between being a curriculum designer and all of that knowledge that you took from all of your teaching experiences, whether you were in museums or whether you were in, a classroom with kids, it all kind of moves toward the same thing. And that's just like what I've heard is that a lot of educators from various spheres and different fields, but educators in some way, have been moving into instructional design. And has that been your experience, like with other instructional designers in your network?
Yes, I have certainly noticed that, between the last 2 years and what's been going on with schools and educators just deciding that, maybe it is time for a shift. And there, all the points you mentioned about curriculum design and cognitive theory and such, having those parallels between working with younger students and building curriculum. Of course, we're working with people of very different ages, so that is something where I find some people need to go ahead and work on, or that's their stumbling block. But you can learn that.
You learn anything.
I mean, sure, pedagogy, you can learn andragogy and cybergogy. It's all good. So,
And if someone's kind of looking to get connected to a network of instructional designers, do you have any tips on where someone can look for that? Is LinkedIn a good spot?
LinkedIn is a great spot. Let's see. I have a few people who I follow very specifically on LinkedIn. Am I allowed to list them?
Yeah, for sure. Go for it. This is just your personal experience, right? Like these are just folks you like to follow.
Yep. So I would say that Kara North, that's spelled C-A-R-A, North, she has a lot of great information. Her network is also awesome. And Kim, I can never say her last name, Tuohy, Tuohy. She's out of Australia and runs Bella Vista Studios. Her studio LinkedIn or not, YouTube page was a big part of me making that transition from pedagogy to andragogy, K through 12 to corporate, because they focus a lot on Kathy Moore's action mapping. Another person to follow, Kathy Moore, that's Moore. And I'm currently doing a book club on her book action mapping. So those three women are really amazing to follow. I found them to be really, the information that they produce and the experiences that they produce have been really useful and engaging and wonderful. And thoughtful and creative.
I'll make sure to grab that list from you so that I can just send out to anybody who signed up for this afterwards, like just so that to make sure that everyone knows that. And I mean, I know I've been asking you about who, are the people you've been following, but you are now one of those people. You are a senior instructional designer. So as we're wrapping up, I'm just wondering, are there any ways that you would prefer folks to get in touch with you? If anybody has more questions for you and wants to connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is great. I currently am not quite as active on LinkedIn as I'd like to be, just because we're doing this big work project and I'm got a few other projects going. But yeah, LinkedIn, the Rumie Discord, I'm pretty active there. I try to be. I know that I've been slacking a bit lately. but
no, it's just great having you in there.
And my book club is also on Discord, so if you contact me on the Rumie Discord, I can also go ahead and answer any questions about that. So those are two great ways to get in contact. And I think you had my website in the I have ripped apart my portfolio in the last few months, so hopefully it'll putting it back together. Yeah, I was hired and I was like, okay, now I can make it this amazing thing. And like I said before about lost motivation, I totally lost
It's like when you take all the stuff out of your closet and you want to organize it, and then you actually have to organize it.
And you're like, oh, you mean now I gotta put it back? So I'm at that stage. But I'm happy to answer any questions about portfolios and look at people's portfolios and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Eli. It was such a pleasure chatting with you. And I will make sure to get those names from you and send all those resources, make them available also on the Discord, just so in case anyone missed it, they're still able to tap into those networks.
Wonderful. I'm happy to help with, I know that, like you mentioned, a lot of people are shifting from educational to ID. So anything I can do to assist with that is my pleasure.
And honestly, I'm sure lots of folks are going to be getting a ton out of this and having some follow-up questions for you. And to anybody who's watching live or anybody who's watching this back later, thank you for sticking with us and hanging out and learning a thing or two. And before we sign off, I also just want to point out that we've got other events that happen in our Rumie Discord server. It is Rumie Learn. You can just find it on at the end of any bite at rumie.org. You can find a link and invitation to join that Discord server where you can come hang out with myself, with Eli, and other community members. If you have any goals that you're working towards, a bite that you're reading and you want to get some tips on it, come on in there, whether it's about portfolios and something that maybe Eli can help chat with you about, or maybe you're preparing for an interview or want somebody to take a look at your resume, or you're just not really sure where to start when you're, applying to grad school or something. Come on in and we'll get you sorted out, and then you can also bring your expertise to the table too. And on that note, we're going to sign off. Thank you so much, anybody who joined in, and thank you again, Eli. And we'll, see you on Discord.
Okay, thank you. Take care.